So, why vinyl? I'm going to attempt to answer that question today, at least from my perspective. But before we get into that, we never called these things vinyl. We used to call them records, or if you were really cool, you called it a record. Now, for the record, I was never cool enough to call it a record, but some dudes just were. Aside from that, we had other names. For instance, we referred to this as a 45. It's actually a 7-inch record, but it's played at 45, and if anybody said they had a 45 of something, you knew they were referring to this, which typically had the radio version of the song that you wanted on one side. Then there was a B side. There was usually another track on here. Sometimes it was a different version of the first song, but oftentimes it was just an album track. Now, 45s also sometimes had picture sleeves and looked like this. Then you had the 12-inch single. Now, this is one song or two songs perhaps with maybe some different mixes or versions on it. Very popular for disco, very popular for house and dance music. Sometimes a 12-inch single had artwork on it, like this one right here. And again, you get a song or two on it, maybe a flip side. The EP is something that is a little unique. I don't have a lot of these, but I have a few of these. EPs are 12-inch records, but they've got more than 2 songs on them. Usually an EP has, maybe 4 or 5 songs on it, individual songs. And they have their own title, like this is Billy Idol, Don't Stop. And there's not a song on here called Don't Stop. This is just Billy Idol's EP for 4 of his tracks. And, maybe they were just singles and they were never on an album. So, yeah, this is an EP. But, LP, which stands for long play, this is an entire album. This is a collection of songs. Anywhere from, 6 to 8 to 12 tracks are on this thing. And they're usually at 33. So, yeah, that's what we called them. But, it's all regional. It depends on where you live. But I will say this. Never, ever, 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 ever refer to more than 2 of these as vinyls. There's no plural. Just stop. Sorry about that. So yeah, why vinyl? Is it cost? No. The stuff can get expensive. If you go to Amazon and download an MP3, I think the most it costs is like $1.29. And that sounds pretty good. Doesn't matter what the song is. This right here is in plastic, and there's a reason for it. This is a copy of New Order Substance 1987. And according to the interwebs, a premium copy of this, which is what I have in my hand right here, it's in really nice shape, is going for $175. Now, it's a double album, and it's got, maybe 12 songs on it. But, man, $175. So cost? Absolutely not. How about accessibility? No. Like I said before, you can go on Amazon and download whatever you want. It's all there. Maybe the iTunes store has it, or whatever they call that, where you download for your iPod. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and you can find it. If it's available to download, you can download it. But these suckers sometimes are pretty hard to find, and when you can find them, like I said, they cost a lot of money. So, how about storage? No, these are heavy and they're bulky. I've got these in my basement because there's a concrete floor in my basement. I have a 115-year-old house, 116-year-old house with old floor joists. If I tried to store these upstairs, I'd probably crack the floor and cause structural damage to my home. How about durability? No, they're very fragile. You got to treat them like a jewel. How about transport? Let's say you're a DJ. You want to carry this stuff from gig to gig. Forget about it. I was a young man when we used these on the road, and I'm glad I was a young man because my old man back couldn't take it. I'd have to retire or hire people to carry my records for me. Not only that, but you got to understand, I could put all of these records several times over on a flash drive. Easily. So this weighs a lot less than this probably ton of records behind me. How about sound quality? Maybe. It depends on your ear, I guess. It's kind of a personal opinion. This is kind of how I break it down. If it's a really good analog recording, pressed on a really good material and mastered very well on a premium turntable with a premium needle and cartridge, on a wonderful sound system with a good preamp and amplifier and speakers, sometimes the analog recording wins. I've got a copy of Stevie Nicks Stand Back right here. It's got a lot of analog synth in it, and it sounds incredible on my turntable. It's 45 RPM. It's a great recording, and I would say the synth really stands out on this track, and it sounds better than a digital file to me, to my ears. This record right here took me by surprise a while back. Madonna's Live to Tell. More synth, more just kind of unique sounds coming out of this record that I love. And it sounds incredible on my turntable. On the other hand, this record right here, which I bought when it first came out, Yes 90125, sounds awful. And the reason it does, I think, is because A, the pressing is bad. Like the quality materials they used, the weight, and the grooves aren't very deep. It just wasn't mastered very well on very good material in the first place. The other problem with this record is it's got some of the first digital samples on it from the Fairlight Series 2. The guitar stuff is actually samples. The horn stabs and all kinds of stuff on this record is actually digital. So when you go from digital to analog or analog to digital, there's some degrading in the sound. And yeah, this sounds much better on something like a compact disc to my ears. A lot of people like jazz and things like that on record. But again, you've got to have a very high-end setup for this to really sound right. And most of us, in all fairness, back in the old days, didn't have a high-end setup, myself included. I couldn't afford that stuff. I had whatever Kmart had available that Mom and Dad got me for Christmas, and it was all belt drive, really lightweight stuff, the whole entire system, including speakers and cassette deck and tuner and everything else. Might have ran them $150, where we're talking about turntables, needles, and cartridges that can put you in the thousands of dollars, along with a stereo system to support it. You need all that stuff to really get a great analog recording to sound fantastic. No, with CD, it doesn't really matter that much how much the player itself costs, because it's reading a digital code with a laser, and it sounds good no matter what. Oh yeah, sure, back in the old days, there were people who would love to sell you a $3,000 CD player, but nobody needed it because the $80 Sharp that you picked up at Kmart made the CD sound just as good. I still haven't given you a good reason why you would even want to deal with this stuff. But, there's some things that I want to talk about that I think everybody can universally understand. The first thing is physical ownership of something. This is a representation of a song or a collection of songs that you can hold it in your hand. It's a connection to the music that you just don't have with some MP3 download of intellectual property. Look at this artwork. I mean, that's subjective too, whether or not it's good, but it's cool. There's artwork on the front and back. It's large enough where you can see. I mean, heck, you can hang it on your wall if you wanted to. This particular LP is a bifold. You can open it up. I don't know. I think it's neat. You may like it or not like it. I don't know, but it's a lot more interesting than what you get when you download an MP3. Now, what really taught me a lot about music was this right here. This is a record liner. Your record goes inside of this. And sometimes they're incredibly generic. They're very delicate, by the way. Sometimes they're just white with a hole punched in the center. But this particular one, look at it. It's got more pictures on it. If you look at the back, there's a lot of writing back here. Those are called liner notes. And I learned so much about artists and musicians and producers and instruments and all kinds of stuff just reading these liner notes. Sometimes you'd sit around and listen to an LP, and while you were listening to it, you check this out. More connection to the music, That's another thing about an LP. There's no fast forward and there's no rewind. Now, some of you will look at that as an inconvenience. And as a DJ, I can tell you that it could be a pain in the butt to cue a record to a track sometimes. But I'll also tell you this. Most of the time, if you picked up a CD, you probably wouldn't bother listening to the tracks that you didn't know. You might skip over them. Heck, MP3s, you don't usually download an MP3 album, and if you do, you don't listen to the whole thing. You only listen to the tracks that you like. On something like an LP, the tracks are arranged in an order that the artist wanted to put them in. And sometimes there were songs in between the big songs that you didn't want to bother to get up and move the tone arm over or the needle on the record to the next track. You just went ahead and listened to it. And sometimes you heard a track you liked that you didn't know you'd like. The album track. And maybe later on down the road, I don't know, that album track would become a single. You'd be ahead of the curve. Happened all the time with LPs. And yeah, while we were listening to those, these liner notes were just invaluable to me. And I really had a lot of fun checking them out. And I miss it with new music. Now, if we want to talk about my connection to this stuff, it goes a little deeper. Like I mentioned earlier, I never had a great turntable, but I had records. And there was a time when that was your best bet. I mean, nothing sounded better than a record. As long as you had a halfway decent turntable, it sounded better than an 8-track or a cassette, so you'd get the record. And it was more valuable, too. Records do wear, but not as badly as cassettes and 8-tracks, and they would get eaten up in your machine, too, and then it was just ruined. I mean, you couldn't do much about it. Although I did learn how to take some Scotch tape and splice things together and make them work when I had to, but sometimes I'd end up, missing half the song. That was okay, though. At least I didn't have to throw the thing away. But as a DJ, I remember some of this stuff just being out of reach for me. I couldn't afford it. But, man, the people who had some of this stuff, I mean, if they really loved their music and they loved their collection, they took such good care of their records. They were like jewels, And, down the road as I got a little older, CDs came in. Records fell out of fashion because CDs were very convenient, and as I said, you didn't need anything expensive to play them on. They sounded great. People started getting rid of their records, started getting rid of their turntables, and I was the scavenger who picked the stuff up because I saw value in it. I thought it was cool. And I became a big collector at that point, not only of records, but of turntables themselves, the good stuff. Are, good enough for me. You can spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on a turntable. But the old Technics 1200 Mark II, that's good enough for me. And you got those nuances too, that some people find nostalgic, and I do too, to an extent. Things like doing a scratch, or even the pops, and the little noises that you hear on the vinyl itself. See, I said vinyl, but I was referring to the material that the record was made of. There's a difference. So yeah, they're not for everybody, and I totally get that. But I love them. And what I've done back here is I've tried to curate a real solid collection that kind of tells the story of my life the way I saw it through music. And it's always growing, and it's always changing, and it's really exciting when somebody comes down here to the studio and is interested, and I can share it with them. We can put some of these records on and talk about them and look at the cover art and look at the liner notes. That's fun for me. Typically, truth be told, I don't sit around and listen to this stuff when I'm alone. But when somebody's down here and I can share it, I love it. It's just this connection thing. And something else I will mention too, crate digging and discovering this stuff, just rummaging through old records at a store, is an experience that I love. I will see things that I forgot about when I'm crate digging through records. Oh my gosh. And a lot of times I like to go to the discount bin. They've got the records at the premium price, like up top. And down below, usually, there's the bargain bin, $1, $2, whatever they are. I thumb through those and I find stuff that the person who tagged the stuff at the record store just had no clue. They priced it wrong, and it's gold. Maybe it's something I've never seen before. Maybe it's something that I've got a copy of, but this copy is much nicer and it's only $1 or $2. I crate dig all over the world. I've done it in Europe. I've done it all over the United States. I even did it in Canada. I didn't do it when I was in Australia, but next time I go to Australia, I'll be crate digging there too, because their domestic stuff is important to me. And that's another thing. It's fun to find different cover art. I've got the Police Synchronicity back here. I think there were 36 different covers for that album, believe it or not. And it's fun to discover new ones. I think I have 3 or 4 different versions of that album cover. They're all a little different. So, yeah, it's art. It's having something you can hold in your hand that connects you to the music. It's caring enough about the music to take care of it and not let it get damaged. And, sometimes it's just those discarded jewels that you just can't believe somebody, they owned it at one time, they loved it so much, but then for whatever reason they just decided to let it go. And I don't blame you if you do, because it's not practical, but it sure is cool. To me, anyway. That's it. Not a quick video today, but thought I'd throw it out there. And, yeah, if you got any questions, comments, whatever, I'd love to hear them down here in the comment section. I do appreciate your likes, your subscriptions, your comments. I guess if you ring that notification bell, it'll notify you when I put a video up. I'm not going to tell you to check out my merch because I don't have any, and I don't plan on getting any anytime soon. So don't worry about that. Just thank you for your support. I appreciate you. Thanks for watching. Practice and enjoy.